Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to reverse engineer the operating system of one of the absolute greatest analytical minds in business history, Charlie Munger. Now, for decades, he was known as the brilliant, fiercely independent architect behind one of the most successful corporate empires the world has ever seen. But his real genius? It wasn't just in picking stocks. It was in how he systematically understood the world. So we're going to break down the exact mental framework he used to analyze incredibly complex problems, and this is completely derived from his own speeches, writings, and the memories of the people who knew him best. Let's dive in.
To really understand the sheer anomaly of his success, I want you to consider this staggering number for a second: 13,500. That is the multiple by which Berkshire Hathaway's market value increased from 1964 under the guidance of Munger and his partner. We are talking about a leap from a $10 million valuation to roughly $135 billion over a few decades, and practically without any increase in outstanding shares. It's a phenomenal, almost incomprehensible level of growth, all achieved by consistently recognizing opportunities that other investors completely missed.
And you know the partner who helped achieve that growth? Warren Buffett. But Buffett actually gave Munger this hilarious nickname, the Abominable No Man. It perfectly cemented Munger's role as the deeply rational, silent partner who essentially wielded logic like a weapon to strike down bad ideas. You see, if Buffett was the accelerator, Munger was very much the highly calibrated brake, constantly working to avoid what he called the obvious extreme irrationality in the business world.
Okay, so here's the exact blueprint to this mastermind. We're starting with his foundation of values, then we'll map out his framework, explore this crazy thing called the Lollapalooza Effect, look at his actual discipline of investing, and finally wrap up with his wisdom for the long game.
All right, part one, a foundation of values. So Munger's unmatched discipline, it didn't just magically appear on Wall Street. It actually started back during the Great Depression in Omaha, Nebraska. As a kid, he worked these grueling 12-hour shifts at a grocery store, which, fun fact, was actually owned by Warren Buffett's grandfather, and that's where he learned the absolute baseline value of hard work. But intellectually, his foundation was really built on a profound admiration for the eclectic wisdom of Benjamin Franklin. Munger literally idolized Franklin's curiosity, his self-education, and his relentless pursuit of worldly wisdom. And he brought those values straight to his family dinner table. He'd use what his kids called the horrific downward spiral tale to teach ethics. Basically, he'd spin these extreme, sort of funny, but mostly terrifying stories about a guy facing an ethical dilemma, making the wrong choice, and then just suffering this inevitable cascade of catastrophic losses. The core lesson he hammered into his kids: covering up a mistake destroys you, honest, immediate confession saves you. These deeply ingrained values extended to an intense sense of fairness and, frankly, unbreakable focus. For example, his son recalled this one skiing trip where Munger drove 10 minutes out of his way in the freezing snow just to refill a borrowed red Jeep. Why? Because, as he put it, when you borrow a man's car, you always return it with a full tank of gas. It's just what you do. And his focus? Oh, it was legendary. He had this level of intense concentration where he could read dense graph paper or a thick biography completely unbothered by a room full of screaming children or a blaring TV. He could literally just wall off the world.
Moving right along to part two, the framework. Now, what's fascinating is how that intense childhood focus evolved into his completely unique, multidisciplinary approach to business. Munger realized super early on that viewing the world strictly through the lens of economics or finance was a massive trap. He loved to quote the old saying, "To the man with a hammer, the world looks like a nail." So to avoid being that guy, he painstakingly built a framework of what he called multiple mental models. He essentially taught himself the biggest ideas from all the major academic disciplines and used them constantly to stitch together a comprehensive view of reality. He treated investing much more like rigorous scientific inquiry than just standard finance. By borrowing these huge ideas from entirely different fields, he created this interconnected ecosystem of thought in his head. He'd look to engineering for concepts like redundancy and backup systems. He'd pull from mathematics for compound interest, physics for breakpoints and critical mass, biology for the Darwinian synthesis of adaptation, and psychology to really grasp human cognitive misjudgment. With this latticework of roughly 100 different models operating in his brain, Munger could evaluate the strengths or fatal flaws of almost any business in under 60 seconds. 60 seconds! Which brings us to part three, the Lollapalooza Effect. So, all of these mental models build into one of Munger's most original and famous concepts. He coined the term Lollapalooza Effect to describe what happens when a bunch of these models actually combine. When 2, 3, or maybe 4 of these invisible forces are all operating in the exact same direction, they don't just add up 1 + 1 = 2. They create a critical mass. It's an explosive nuclear compounding of results. Recognizing when these forces perfectly aligned, or when they brutally conflicted, gave Munger a massive analytical edge over investors who were just staring at standard financial metrics all day.
But, and this is crucial, before finding those massive successes, he always fell back on a rule from the great algebraist Carl Jacobi: invert, always invert. Munger figured out how to succeed by first deciding exactly what to avoid. He'd joke, "All I want to know is where I'm going to die, so I'll never go there." It's brilliant, and it perfectly balanced his ultra-rational mind with his quirky personality, like the time he accidentally sank a boat on a totally calm lake in Minnesota simply by going full speed in reverse. He knew he wasn't perfect, so he constantly inverted problems to ensure he avoided doing anything stupid.
All right, let's jump to part 4, the discipline of investing.
So how did he actually apply this crazy framework to the day-to-day art of investing? Well, Munger loved to ask people this question: what does a .400 baseball hitter have in common with a billionaire investor? To answer it, he borrowed a concept straight from baseball legend Ted Williams, who literally divided his strike zone into 77 distinct little cells, each roughly the size of a baseball.
And this is just the perfect illustration of Munger's entire philosophy. Ted Williams would only ever swing at balls in his absolute best cells. He ignored the rest because he knew reaching for bad pitches would destroy his average. In the exact same way, Munger practices what he quite bluntly calls sit on your ass investing. He brutally resists the urge to act just for the sake of acting. He'd just sit there watching security prices get thrown at him all day long, totally amused, doing absolutely nothing, just waiting patiently for that one slow, straight, fat pitch right in his sweet spot. And when he finally sees it, he swings with the full, heavy weight of his capital.
To filter out the endless market noise, he forced every single potential investment through 3 brutal baskets on his desk. Yes, no, and too tough to understand. He totally hated the idea of sifting through piles of sand just to find a tiny speck of gold. So, heavily promoted IPOs? Straight into the no basket. Highly complex, hyped-up tech or pharmaceutical companies? Tossed immediately into the too tough to understand pile. He dramatically shrank his universe of options down to only what was simple, predictable, and dominant.
And to actually survive that gauntlet and make it into his extremely rare yes basket, a company had to possess a widening moat. Munger defines a moat as an enduring competitive advantage that basically acts as a virtual physical barrier against competitors. He leans heavily on his biological models here, because he knows a business has to survive the relentless Darwinian forces of competitive destruction over time. If a company's moat is visibly widening every single year, he knows that business is going to survive and thrive over the long haul.
Finally, part 5, wisdom for the long game.
Ultimately, Munger valued life decisions way above mere financial ones. He was deeply inspired by the ancient Roman philosopher Cicero, specifically his writings praising old age. Munger believes society actually gets it completely backward. While youth obviously gives you physical advantages and strength of body, Munger argued that old age brings the absolute ultimate advantage, strength of mind. He was a champion of continuous, lifelong self-improvement. He famously said that understanding both the power of compound interest and the difficulty of getting it is the heart and soul of understanding a lot of things. And for him, that compounding applied just as much to wisdom as it did to money.
He fully internalized Cicero's profound lesson: the best armor of old age is a well-spent life preceding it. Munger truly believed, right down to his core, that a life spent in the pursuit of useful knowledge, honorable actions, and the daily practice of virtue is the only real comfort you'll have in your final years. Wealth, that was just a byproduct of rationality for Munger. His real goal was always the independence to think clearly and live decently.
So, as we wrap up this explainer on Charlie Munger's incredible mind, I want to leave you with a question. Are you building your own well-spent life as armor for the future? Are we taking the time today to build our own latticework of mental models to protect us tomorrow? Munger proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that rationality isn't just a strategy for investing. It is, quite literally, a way to live. So what mental models are you going to start applying to your life right now?